Hi, and welcome to the Webit Global Impact Forum. Today's panel is on cyber resilience for a secure and safe digital world. Obviously, this year, the subject of cybersecurity has become a hot topic, that's since the Ukraine war, but obviously for other reasons too. So without further ado, I want to introduce my esteemed panel. I have Cabrera from Trend Micro, Sundaram from Akamai Security Technology Group, Alessandro Menna from Italgas, and Podjarny from Snyk. So I want to start off, I just went ahead there with mentioning Ukraine, but that's not the only reason. So the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of challenges, both economic, we've had the COVID pandemic, and the war in Ukraine. So what did you see from the cybersecurity industry? What changes have you seen in the last 2 years? I'm going to put that question to you, Guy.
Sure. I think generally over the last couple of years, we've seen a continued trend of just the importance of cybersecurity and how it influences kind of every aspect of the business. I think what we've seen with the Ukraine war and with threats, national threats as a whole, is that the threat of cybersecurity has expanded from being more around the national threat to national assets into critical kind of systems like the power grid and such. But then I think with Ukraine, a lot of conversations around just the fundamental, almost social fabric of the tools and the faculties that we use and how disrupting them can be very impactful. And so I think over the last 2 years, we've seen an increase in the importance of it and a challenge with sort of the sheer scale of it. And so the conversation over the last 2 years has been, a lot of it has been about how do we do cybersecurity at scale? How do we bring it to every business? How do we make it easy? How do we make it something that can truly roll out versus just protecting the top assets and the most security sensitive organizations?
Manny, would you say you've seen the same thing with your company?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Guy completely hit it. We've seen a lot of things that are changing now with all of the different events that are happening in the world. Specifically in Europe, for example, immediately after the war started, we've seen DDoS attacks go up by about 200%. I mean, 200% since last year, just in terms of distributed denial of service attacks. And same the Americas too, not just recently, but over the last 2-3 years, we've seen attacks almost double. DDoS attacks. And this is based on all the information that our SOC gives us. In addition to all of this, you've seen other attacks go up in the world, web application attacks and so on. So I think the world's just in the midst of a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. And when things like this happen, bad geopolitical things like this happen, there are a lot of threat actors out there who want to take advantage of it. So security is definitely something that everybody's talking about in pretty much most corporations these days.
And Ed, I want to talk to you about the types of attacks we've seen, because it looks like they've kind of changed from these ransomware attacks. What have you seen in the last 2 years? Has there been an increase in attacks? And what type of attacks are we seeing now?
So, yeah, I think one of the bigger trends is the blurred lines problem, not only the blurred lines in terms of capabilities, but also those that are actually targeting critical infrastructure or organizations across the board. It's this notion that the rising tide lifts all boats when it comes to capabilities. And you really have cybercrime really coming to the forefront with the ability to do cybercrime as a service. So this automation of attacks and the level of capability in these attacks is definitely growing. So that's one big trend, is that these cyber criminal groups are much more capable than they were before. And then secondly, I think the bigger trend is the effect or the impact on from a digital extortion perspective, be it ransomware, distributed denial of service. It is a shift going strictly from a data breach and data exfiltration, parsing and reselling of data, which still happens, but it's been, now you're seeing a direct impact on operations. Right? From a ransomware perspective, there is an immediate impact to operations. And now we're talking about downtime being one of the major costs to organizations. Now you look through the evolution of ransomware, and we've gone from the type of ransomware where you're just really locking people out and they're not getting access to their computers, to crypto ransomware that made that shift between 2015 and 16. But now we're seeing double extortion, triple extortion types of attacks, where they're not just encrypting the data that they find on a compromised network. Now they're exfiltrating that data, and they heighten the impact to organizations by saying, hey, if you don't pay us, then we're also going to dox you and release all this sensitive information. So you're seeing this gradual growth, maybe a decrease in the volume of ransomware attacks overall, but the impact and those that they're targeting, such as critical infrastructure, is going up exponentially.
Okay, so there we spoke a little bit about sort of critical infrastructure. So obviously there's been a lot of attacks on government infrastructure, those kind of things. Are we also seeing attacks on businesses? What else are we seeing? Who is being targeted?
I think anybody where they can monetize the attacks. So you're looking at from the perspective of traditionally manufacturing, education. A lot of these organizations, education is slightly different because you have research institutions that have a lot of valuable data that from a cyber espionage perspective, but also obviously from a corporate espionage perspective. But what we're seeing now is non-traditional organizations that are being targeted because of digital extortion, right? Manufacturing, operational technology, so OT, so anything that is a production line, manufacturing facility, this, that, the other, become better targets because they're possibly not as mature as, say, other sectors in the financial sectors and so forth to protect themselves. So they become a very lucrative target. So before, when you were thinking of data breach, that it was retail going after credit card data and so forth. Now we're seeing a much more diverse monetization, right? When it comes to motivation from the cyber criminal perspective. Cyber espionage traditionally have been really, when you talk to blurred lines, they've focused on really just staying low and slow, possibly depending on the threat actor, but also the data that they're going after. Now they're really dipping their toe or their entire foot or torso into cybercrime, right? From a North Korea perspective, they're doing a lot of cyber criminal activity, being especially going after cryptocurrencies and wallets and exchanges to fund government programs. So you see this transition of, okay, everybody's a target at this point, and a lucrative target at that.
All right, so that's quite worrying. We'll go on to cyber defense a little bit later on. Alessandro, I want to come to you. Firstly, tell me a little bit about Italgas and how has the company itself what has it done to protect against these cyber threats?
Thank you. Well, actually, Italgas is a great example of digital master in the energy sector. As far as we have moved to cloud in the late 2016, we have digitalized the entire gas distribution infrastructure from the main city gateways to the district governors up to the smart meters. So the entire infrastructure is nowadays fully digital. And that's not just because of our, let me say, orientation towards innovation. It is because, of course, such an infrastructure nowadays, in order to sustain the energy transition strategy of our country, but let me say the European energy transition strategy, it has to be digital in order to host different kind of gases, enable reverse flow capabilities. So you can achieve these kind of objectives just only if you have a fully digital kind of infrastructure. And as far as then it is a fully digital infrastructure, it is subject to all of the kind of risks that we traditionally have seen in the cyber domain. But moreover, what I'm also looking at very carefully nowadays, it is the important, evident correlation between the traditional, let me say, physical kind of threats and the cyber related threats, which have really become very much integrated nowadays. So the great complexity for a critical national infrastructure, it is to deal with the two kind of domains as we were used to, let me say, autonomously, but also in an integrated end-to-end way, because then a DDoS attack or any kind of other cyber-related attack can directly affect also our physical infrastructures and vice versa. So we are really tackling this kind of new capability, let me say, operational capability, in order to become much more resilient to the future kind of converged attacks that may happen in the future.
Okay, we'll talk about the technology that you're building in a little moment. But first I want to say, if you do have any comments for us and you want to share your thoughts or questions, you can find us on social media at #Webit. So Guy, I want to come to you next and ask you, what have you found to be the biggest challenges for Snyk in the last 2 years, and how have you overcome them? And also, if you can tell our audience a little bit more about Snyk.
Sure. So, well, Snyk's challenges are like a little bit more sort of a startup hypergrowth on it. The problem that we tackle from a security sense is that a lot of our security tools today are reactive. They might be amazing, but they are about detecting an attacker and identifying it and blocking things. But increasingly, we're just not doing enough around actually shipping secure software. And the realization that to actually change the equation in terms of how we protect ourselves, we have to build security into the software development process. We have to build developer tools that tackle security and that kind of walk and talk and quack like a dev tool. That are actually designed to be embraced by developers as a natural part of their software development process. And so Snyk's kind of role in reason for existence is really that, is around building a developer-first security solution that today is embraced and reaches millions of developers worldwide, to help make security a natural part of their software development process and secure their code, secure the open source components they're using, their cloud infrastructure, and so on and so forth. A lot of the key challenge as we sort of promote this need is really proving that it's doable. It's around kind of getting organizations to adapt and accept that this is something that developers will embrace, a security solution, if it's built correctly. But also around the fact that this requires more than technology. It's around a transformation. And when you talk about digital transformation and the way we develop in the cloud, those are not just technology changes. They're a change to how we develop software, how we build it, how we ship it. And when we think about security, there's been too much, I like to say security as an industry hasn't gotten the memo, it's sort of stayed a bit more centralized, still very controlling. And so there's a cultural shift that needs to happen. And we enable that, as part of Snyk, but it's much easier to buy some magic solution and have a problem go away. It's much harder to actually change the way your organization, your security entity, how it interacts with developments works. And so I think that's been the change. And the good news is that it has evolved substantially in the industry, both in acceptance, it can be done and it has to be done, and in role models and practices that are increasingly becoming standard.
Okay, great. And Manny, would you agree with that we need more than technology, and it's a little bit of a cultural change we need?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Guy was spot on. There are a lot of things that are happening right now that make it actually confusing for security buyers. I mean, aside from everything else going on in the world, complex geopolitical environments, supply chains, digital supply chains being attacked every day, impersonation attempts that are becoming harder to detect, malware, ransomware, all of the stuff. Security buying is a complex job. And I was our CIO prior to this role, and you're flooded with vendors, every one of whom talks about solving every single problem that exists today in the security world. And so parsing through all of that makes it pretty hard. And I think from where we stand, there's a few trends that are inevitable, right? I mean, obviously moving to the cloud is an inevitable trend. Obviously, Snyk plays a great role there in terms of securing the developer ecosystem. Aside from that, web applications are here to stay. Anybody who uses the internet in any kind of way is dealing with web applications. And when you have web applications, you're dealing with the need to protect them using, application firewalls, protect against bots, protect against malicious humans that exist today. I mean, you have cyber criminals having human armies that are following the money and are designed to go where there's an opportunity for theft. Infrastructure is under attack every day. And then now you have, obviously, with post-COVID world, with a lot of us now working remotely from home, employees are under attack. Malware, phishing, ransomware, all of that is just spreading. So from a security buyer standpoint, I think it's remarkably complicated today. And there are a lot of vendors in this space who are there to guide you. But I think it is a complex environment, and security buyers need to be very discerning these days to make sure that they're getting the right solutions.
And what would you say would be the new technologies that are kind of needed to prevent these types of attacks?
I think any technology is going to be a combination of people, process, and pure tech. I think machine learning definitely is here to stay. So because there's so much of data that's coming in today, you really need to have a solution that leverages some kind of machine learning to make sure that you're optimal. I would actually say maybe the bigger challenge is people. This is a tough industry to be in, with what was called as a great resignation, or maybe now it's called the long resignation, because people are constantly moving around. You need to have competent people in security, which is quite hard these days, because just the few of them, and the industry is exploding at such a dramatic pace. And I'd say the winners in this new world will be the companies that will be the most adaptable, because we don't know what's going to change. Today, you might see, as a result of the Ukraine war, you might see an increase in infrastructure problems. Tomorrow, it could be something completely different. There's an article today about email being the new problem. So things change a lot. And I think the winner in this ecosystem will be somebody who can adapt quickly and react to the new threats, the new adversaries that are coming up.
Mm-hmm. Ed, you're nodding your head there. Do you agree with that?
No, absolutely. I always think that when you think of resiliency, it lies at the intersection of people, process, and technology, right? And so everything that you do, it's not just one leg of the stool, such as a technology piece. It's the people process. I would actually submit that you look at just about any data breach or ransomware attack, there is possibly more likelihood of a breakdown in people and process, be it the delivery of a phishing email and compromise there, and or a breakdown in process where you have a vulnerability management situation where patches are not deployed quick enough. So I really think absolutely it's not just a one path to resilience. It's multiple paths that have to be taken at the same time. The one thing that we talk about a lot lately is attack surface management, right? So not only are our attack surface growing exponentially with things that we've been talking about for quite some time, which is assets in cloud and IoT, industrial IoT, but it's also people as well associated in that. So I think because all the remote workforce that is happening, I know a lot of these workforce that we're seeing globally is coming back to the office, but I still think we'll have a hybrid workforce going forward. So that risk is going to be there. So resiliency is really tied to how do you manage and prioritize? How do you speed up your detection, or rather the identification of assets, from an attack surface management? How do you speed up your ability to detect an actual attack or vulnerability that you have within your system? And then how do you speed up the remediation? I think what's happened really is this, not only the exponential growth of assets that we have to protect, but it's also the speed of which we're seeing that cyber threat actors are able to quickly, from a proof of concept and or vulnerability that's disclosed, how quickly within hours, you have a exploit possibly in the wild. So I always, without sounding doom and gloom, but yeah, I think, the path to resilience has to take multiple roads at the same time.
Okay, I have sorry, Guy, did you want to say something there?
I was just going to add that I think a part of the key to that as well is decentralization. And so I think with all of these things, when we want to move fast, you have to empower the teams that are building it. A lot of the innovation speed is driven by the fact that teams can run, that own things end to end, run with it, make good decisions. And so security has to be weaved into that. So whether it's responding to an attack reported by Trend Micro, it's configuring Akamai to properly protect kind of your systems. I'm sure Alessandro has built up his methodologies, as they've gone more digital. I think a lot of it is not just about which tools you're choosing, but it's around the decentralization, the enabling the teams that are doing the work to make secure decisions, to respond to items. It requires the expertise. Security attacks are security attacks, and it's not that everyone is able to handle them, but you have to embed that security, those security mindset and controls into the hands of the individual groups making the decisions.
Great, and I want to put a question out there, so whoever wants to volunteer to take it can. So we've spoken a lot there about cyber defense, but what role does cyber offense play? So I've sort of spoken to a few experts about, governments are building these capabilities, they're not using it, but maybe also in the private sector. What role is cyber offense going to play in the future, do you think?
Is this question for me?
Anyone who wants to take it.
Well, actually, before joining Italgas, before I was then called to be the chief security officer of Italgas, I used to work for 15 years in the defense industry. So I was in one of the largest, at least, aerospace and defense and security company as a provider. No, then my customers were actually the Ministry of Defense, NATO. I would refer more to active defense instead of really offense, first of all, because in my opinion, the first layer of offense, it is threat intelligence, at least, in order to identify what could be actually the threat actors profile, the techniques that may be exploited. So first of all, in order to somehow then act proactively, first of all, understand who your target is and what could be actually the threat vector they may be exploiting in the future. In my opinion, I don't want to comment on governmental operational capabilities that we may be not aware of necessarily, but at least for sure, what is a key capability that any kind of organization nowadays should be investing on, it is, as I mentioned, threat intelligence. So that is really something that cannot be, let me say, an option. It must be part of the capability framework of any kind of digital organization nowadays, because simply you cannot afford to just deal with the incident once it is being detected. You need to be able to manage risk. In order to manage risk, you need to be able to identify the potential risks that may be impacting your attack surface, so your digital infrastructure. And therefore, threat intelligence, in my opinion, active defense to some extent, should be something really key in the future for digital organization. Then I will leave the floor to my colleagues.
I would say, because of where I've come from. So I spent 20 years in the United States Secret Service, working and leading many different cybersecurity programs. I think there is a line, and Alessandro speaks to it, that I think there is a general consensus that, active defense is good. Hacking back possibly can get you into more problems and go down, a rabbit hole from an organizational perspective, and possibly increase the risk that your organization will face. So I think that what we're seeing is a much more, we see that government entities are really reaching out on the public-private partnership perspective, to be able to help with identifying or quickly identifying possibly cyber threat actors, campaigns, in operations. We've seen that with CISA releasing some known vulnerabilities on critical infrastructure, especially OT technology, that really did not come from government, but came from the private sector. So I think it's not an either or binary situation. I think there is a level of active defense. I think one, you should be doing as an organization as much as you possibly can to identify the motivations and the groups behind a possible attack. So oftentimes we've talked in the past that, hey, I don't need to know who's attacking me from an attribution perspective. I just need to defend myself, which to some extent, yes. But how could you really completely establish the strategy that you need without understanding the motivations and the individuals possibly behind an attack or campaign? So I think from an active defense, the first step is understanding who is attacking you, right? Understanding not only the threats that you face, but the vulnerabilities that you have. But then from an active defense is, we, from a trend micro perspective, partner with international law enforcement organizations, and behind the scenes, when appropriate, we are able to partner and provide additional information and or evidence to help an investigation, for example. But we also partner at the level of threat intelligence and information sharing at the CERT level. So these are the things that we realize. Obviously, it's unique to us because we're a cybersecurity solutions provider, but we realize that we really have to do something and play a part and do our part for the greater good and provide threat intelligence whenever we can and appropriate.
All right, I want to move on to look a little bit more about the future. So Web3, the metaverse, blockchain, all technology we're talking about. What are going to be the challenges, especially in the metaverse, with putting in cybersecurity? What have you seen so far, and what are you working on?
From our perspective, we're constantly looking at where are our customers going personally and professionally, because we do have a consumer business, but an enterprise business. And so we're constantly looking to see where, from a technology perspective, what are those next areas of interest? So same thing we did in cloud and IoT and industrial IoT, supply chain, software supply chain risk, focusing on that. But I think going forward, you sort of, I think, alluded to it. If we're going to say the words meta, I think, obviously, wherever we move, cyber criminals and cyber threat actors will be there hand in hand, looking to exploit, monetize, and or steal information from a cyber espionage perspective. So, it's one of those things that we're constantly working and partnering, but also doing the research on the back end, saying from a technology and platform perspective, where are we going personally and professionally? And that's where our focus is at.
Guy, what would you say to that? Well, I would say, so look, every technology offers opportunities and threats in terms of its capabilities. Cloud is a good example of it. It could represent a huge security risk if you mishandle it, or it could be, a big kind of level up in terms of how well you secure your system. Depends on how you do it. I think specifically crypto, and to an extent, the move to a more digital life. The biggest issue we have is one of trust, and crypto can help with that. And so today, because our systems are so complicated, whether they are internal or external, the whole software supply chain of us consuming a piece of open source and it's maintained by a set of people, and in turn it uses another piece of open source or 10 of them, and they're maintained by a set of people, and what's the journey these components have made it all the way to your production system on it is so complex and so out of reach that we resort to blind trust, and increasingly that trust is sort of unjustified, and we see kind of adversaries attacking it and sort of exploiting weak chains. And I think this trust is it's really across our society, right? From a piece of news that we read to, to really kind of sometimes even professional opinions, they're all tainted a little bit because the system is very interconnected. It's too complicated to make sense of all the time. And so what we need to do is we do need to institutionalize some of these trusts, at least validate, verify things. And I do think that crypto offers both offers a real opportunity of doing that, because technically anybody could have stored a register of it, but increasingly we just trust everybody less. And so I do see a big growth, crypto or generally kind of cryptographic, not just blockchains, cryptographic kind of attestations, validations that things have occurred, like a system of record of what has happened, combined with the tools, open source and commercial, that help provide an opinion on whether that chain is good or bad. Specifically for us, we see the open source security and how you consume open source and whether you should be using that or not. But as we move into more digital surroundings as humans, right, as just sort of people engaging with the internet, I think what we need to do is we need to level up that trust. Otherwise, the humans, we are naturally infallible. None of us can consume it, no matter what the level of expertise that we have, can consume all this information and make the right decisions. We need that validation of trust and assessment to be at our fingertips.
Okay, Manny, I want to come to you, and as we're talking about the humans in this, I want to ask you a little bit about data ethics and how do we advance the global sharing of our information while making sure that everything's private, secure, and our data is protected, as well as our human rights?
It's a great question. I think every region in the world is now evolving to come up with their own version of privacy and data protection. And in Europe, you've seen this within the US in some parts, different states are taking a different stance to it. And we are seeing the internet kind of become, go to various pockets, with each pocket treating data in very different ways. Is this the way we want the internet to evolve? I don't think so. I think, the vision behind the internet was free and open exchange of information. But nations have the ability to regulate what is in their borders in terms of information and data. And so we are seeing that. And I think it's a change that is unfortunate, but has happened because of abuse of all of the data in the first place. So I think it's inevitable. And I think we need to be able to understand and work with governments on how to make sure that as much open data is exchanged as is possible to prevent bad actors on the internet, because you need some data anyway to identify who's good and who's bad and so on. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that data sovereignty and the protection of individuals' rights to data privacy is upheld. And it's going to be a balancing act. And I think it'll be a constant movement in the target. I don't think it's going to be saying, I don't think we can say, well, we've done it for Europe and that's the end of the day. It's every data. Europe is going to be different. India is going to be different. China is going to be different. Brazil is looking at something. Even within Europe, some countries have more stringent requirements. You're going to see some of that evolving, and we need to be adaptable and flexible.
Alessandro, would you agree with that as a European company? What are the changes, the differences you're seeing in Europe with regards to protecting people's data and the ethics around it?
Well, actually, the discussion around the data privacy, it is very, very sexy nowadays. As far as we are all seeing also a lot of publications of data about corporate information or even citizens very frequently. It is a problem. I definitely agree with my colleagues. Actually, it is a great problem, and as it has been already said, the real drivers are at least two, in my opinion. One, it is the lack of skills, let me say, even in the pure cyber domain, because this is for sure one of the most important vulnerability for organization security in the future. And the second one, it has been already mentioned, it is the awareness culture, because at the very end of the game, let me say, it is the behavior of every single person actually that makes his own data vulnerable to the possible exploitation by third parties. Actually, I've been quite impressed by one of the most recent marketplace, which is nowadays available to hackers and to insiders, where they sell actually corporate information, which is industrial spy. And I was amazed to see also the business model they have actually put in place in order to make sure that even, let me say, corporates at first should be the most interested parties, let me say, to buy themselves the breaches, because otherwise they would be then published. after a few days, or even the hacker themselves, because then they would be exploiting such information, let me say, to perpetrate other kind of cyber crimes. So in my opinion, actually data privacy will be for sure in the future a hot topic, but we need to work, as already very well said by my colleagues, not only on the human element actually, but also on the technologies. And I perfectly agree with Guy. Technologies around trust, let me say, crypto in particular, but trust, in my opinion, it is also comprising identity, how you deal with identity access, identity management, trustless, let me say, zero trust kind of approach, in order to make sure that the access to data and the resources of any kind of organization, it is actually allowed only to again, verified users and devices. Okay, so everything around trust will be for sure, let me say, a hot topic for the next decade or so.
Okay, Guy, I just want to ask you a quick question there, and then I will ask you all a final question. So with Alessandro there was talking about people, and they need to make sure that the platforms they're sharing their data on, they're more aware of everything. Social media has obviously got a lot of stick because of third parties, data, etc. How do you see the transformation of social media with regards to people's data?
Yeah, I mean, I think we often like to kind of have our cake and eat it too as well. And so I think we're asking social media, which is problematic by its very nature, before any security breaches happened, it has significant sort of social challenges. But we're asking it on one hand to be massively private and not see our data. And there's a lot of sort of drive towards that. And on the other hand, moderate, and that requires, lo and behold, seeing the data. Not only seeing the data, analyzing the data, keeping some element of historical perspective on the data so that it can identify anomalies. And so I think social media companies, first of all, they vary in terms of how good or how well they keep the data. Many of them are actually like pretty good in terms of not leaking the data. The security caliber of the Facebook of the world is actually quite good. I think their problem is more about the fact that their business model is around monetizing the data. And so I think the free web needs to evolve its sort of ethical practice. I don't think it's just social media. It's also, news websites and others, today we all like free, but we don't like ads, we don't like tracking, and it's something that needs to be resolved. I don't think there is a fundamental fix to that, but I do think that increasingly in society we've gone to a place in which subscription business models are more tolerable, and maybe people move to that, in which you might control your data a bit more. And maybe I'll give a shout out to a project by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who's the inventor of the internet, and he has a very interesting project, for instance, at least as a role model, called Pods, in which individuals might save their data, still very nascent, just like as a concept though, control your data and choose to make it available to it. So I think we need, maybe coming back to the trust comment, we need to rethink more the business model, the mode of interaction of who owns the rights to the data, who uses that data, and how do we do that in a way that still accommodates the business needs of being able to have a free and democratic and accessible to everyone web.
Okay, big questions there for the future. So I want to ask you all a quick fire round of questions, and so we're running out of time there. So Manny, I want to start with you. What is your vision for a future society where cybersecurity is responsible and it's secure for us all?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, our goal would be for an internet that's free, that's open, that's fair, that's available to everybody, and has the opportunity to uplift billions of people in this world to a better life. And that should be the goal that we have for the internet. And so if you look at where cybersecurity plays into the mix, the ideal world is that you don't need security because everybody's operating without the need for one. But I think the reality of which is that you will need seamless, smooth, quick cybersecurity solutions that are integrated with all of the different things that we use to interact with the internet or devices, where security isn't a hassle to use. It isn't something that people are trying to disable or avoid because it's just such a pain to use. But it just makes the internet a lot better for our use. That would be, I think, our goal would be the internet is a tool for us to make people's lives better, and we hope it gets to that point.
Ed, I want to put that question for you. What are your hopes for the future?
Well, I think that the hope is sort of piggyback what Guy was mentioning. I really think, because it's one thing that he alluded to, that I think might be the way this is changed, because be it regulatory or changing the internet infrastructure itself, I don't know, there was really no easy solution, but the progress we're making with blockchain and possibly moving to this model like Guy was mentioning, and I'm assuming with the pods project he was mentioning, is being able to leverage blockchain to be able to change that business model where we all own our own data, and we're able to then even monetize that data for ourselves. We do it now almost like Guy was mentioning, it's a sliding scale. We want things for free, but nothing is for free. And so once that is changed, possibly my hope is that that type of progress and from a data broker perspective and changing that business model back to the individual, I think might be one of those most interesting things going forward. But when it comes from a technology and going forward, I think it's always trying to then keep pace and identify from a technology perspective. We didn't talk about 5G today, but that's going to reinvent, everything from small businesses, smart homes, and so forth, when that gains ultimate, adoption. And so there's a lot of things out there that I think it's one of those things that we from Trend Micro perspective are constantly trying to identify what from a technology perspective, where everybody's going and what they're going to be doing, and how can we actually make that progress in that path safer for them.
Okay, Alessandro, what do you think about blockchain being the future and putting our hopes on that?
I don't know if blockchain will be actually the future and able to sort out many problems, let me say. But for sure, what I would hope for the future is a greater level of investment from every single government, every single country, because I think we are still lagging very behind with respect to where we should be in terms of capability development status. And moreover, and I think it is also quite evident from what has been the discussion so far, also the trainings, cybersecurity trainings should be actually mandatory also at school, so that people should be learning about risks and threats that may be facing through using digital technologies since they are very, very, very young. I think those two work streams are already enough for our governments.
Okay, guys, same questions for you. What are your hopes for the future? What do you predict to see happening?
Will happen. So I don't know if it's prediction or wishful thinking here, but I think really we should strive for transparency and ownership. I think oftentimes sunlight is the best cure, and the cybersecurity industry and sort of space has been quite opaque, and for various reasons, many of them quite good. But I think making the industry, the actions anywhere from reporting a breach to the security intelligence, sort of better sharing, to a variety of opportunities for transparency around handling of someone's data. I think transparency will really level us up as an industry. And I think with that needs to come ownership, whether it is, again, a software developer writing software and kind of being responsible for it secure, or someone using a business app, or a salesperson sort of accounting for the customer data that they might be collecting, like whatever it is that is the journey. If we have better transparency and we have better ownership permeated through our business activities, then I think we can build something more secure. And I think it's been demonstrated in ops and in a variety of other spaces as a means to level up. We're never going to be fully out of the woods, but as a way to get to a safer digital world.
Okay, fantastic. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today on this Webit panel. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks so much for the esteemed panel for giving us their visions and viewpoints. You can also find us with the hashtag Webit, so do leave us your comments. and we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much again to the panel.